everybody. Welcome to today's From Boxes to Butterflies. This is going to be a lot of fun today. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since before I asked and was said, this is the date, let's do it. So this is a chance for me to introduce a lot of you to somebody that you don't know. But that's what this is all about, opening up to people in our different circles and just having fun and getting to know who we are. I want to put up a couple of things, a couple of announcements, notes to start with. Here, we're all about helping each other, lifting each other up. If you go based on CJ and Level Up Academy, it's like level up. So when somebody's having some difficulties, we want to be there to support them. And I want to show my dear sister Danielle, who her husband had a medical issue, and so they've had some issues, some struggles. This is an opportunity for us to just put our arms around her. A fund's been set up focused on I believe it's meal planning, but even just to let her know that you see her, support her, even just to say, how are you doing? Is there anything I can do? That's what these communities are for. How's it going? And I know some of us are introverts, so it might be a little bit harder. Still, it's family. And when you have somebody this close, you want to do what you can to help and share. I want to talk, as I mentioned, CJ and Level Up. Over the weekend, starting on International Women's Day, I had an article that was published in the Australian Business Journal, and the next day it was published in Auspreneur and Digital Journal. This is an article, I worked with CJ on it, went through her because she's the queen of publicity at this point. And what she was able to do is get this article into a number of journals. This is a chance for brand awareness in areas that I didn't exist before. All my life, it's just kind of been this little corner of LinkedIn, as big as LinkedIn is. And so this was a chance to get on the world stage and to get my message, my focus of move beyond boxes and shine to places that they hadn't heard about it before. Because if they weren't on LinkedIn, if they didn't see my YouTube or my Facebook or Instagram posts, they're not going to know it. So this is another way of brand awareness, of getting ourselves out there. And this was something that I was excited to be able to do. And the last thing I want to pop up is some of my books. And when it comes to these three books, Faith of the Butterfly is my own reinvention memoir. It covers the 2 years leading up to when I entered 2022 with a total reinvention. That's a traditionally published book. And then the Armor of God series, those two books, they really are a story version, a fantasy story version of what it means to move beyond boxes and shine. And the beautiful part about all those books, they are all available on Amazon at this point. It's going to be, I see a note there. It's like, it takes me right to where we're headed today. So I'm just going to go straight to it as soon as she gets back. Oh, geez, I was just ready to pull her up, and there we go. just just as I was gonna say, here she
Something
is.
happened.
Oh, it's fine. It happens to me all the time.
We're here now.
It's what the internet does. But I'm so excited to have you on. It's like I couldn't wait. It's like make the announcement short, get her on because
No, you had a lot to announce, and that deserved its time. I mean, incredible, just incredible, Susanna. You know, it's I feel like I've watched you flourish on here from when you were just starting out, and you already had such a wonderful personality. So it's so good to see other people really appreciating that.
it's been, let's see, I think we crossed paths in August-ish of 22.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, because you remember
Because
the month and everything.
well, actually, I remember the month because I went back to see when we first chatted because there was, but see, it was a very special, almost a special group and a special couple of months there
It was. Yeah.
when, because I connected with you. It was about the same time I connected with Sandra J. Wilson
Yep.
and Lindsay Parker. And then in October, I was on Sandra's live stream
Oh.
because she had asked me, "Will you be on? Will you be on?" And I don't promote my story and the aspects of it, but I'm not afraid. I'm not hiding it either. And so
Hmm.
I told her, "Okay, I'll come on, and yes, we can talk my story." So it's like she's the first that I publicly spoke my story, as it were.
And
And then
this is why it's such an important date for you.
it wasn't a week or two later when she was on the Hotness Unleashers with Trevor with it, because that was the blue, green, aquamarine, whatever is what they all were.
Yep.
and and so her three Hotness Unleashers, it was you, Lindsay, and me.
Mm. I remember back then when you reached out to say, I would like to talk to you because I'm going to be, and it must have been Sandra's show. You were saying, I'm going to be on
It
Sandra's
was
show.
exactly. I had
That
I
was
had
so moving
I had a group of you that when it came to my story, I had to tell you in person. I didn't want you to hear it
from a live
as
stream.
just in the audience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I appreciated that. No, that was huge for me. That was huge and, you know, incredibly surprising. I think you remember. But for me, I was so flattered as well that you would take the time to say you're a person that I would want to say this to, like in as close as we can get to in person. If only like I could have hugged you at the time.
I
But
know.
it was really respectful for me as well to like of your part to make that time for me.
And yeah,
Hi, Chasen.
Chasen Chasen
I guess so.
is Chasen in HR for you. He's been great. We've got a lot of people, but what I want to do now is give you that chance to kind of talk about you and how kind of what you've done, what you do, how you got to where we are right now. And I know you've got something slated, what, in a week or two?
Yeah, I have
So
indeed.
I want to
Yeah.
make sure that you get that out too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll start by saying who I am for your lovely audience. I feel like anyone who knows you must know me, but I don't know, maybe that's just my way of seeing things because I feel like we talk all the time. Maybe it's not obvious to other people. Um, yeah, I have been posting now on LinkedIn for going on 2.5 years, every single day. And when we connected was back when Trevor Van Warden was coming up with the Hotness Unleashed show as well. And then that brought us even closer together. So we had even more reasons to be talking. And what originally attracted me to talk to Susanna, and probably the majority of people I talk to, is when you can feel that authenticity, you know that somebody's like really being themselves. And it doesn't matter who that person is, you know, but that you can see that they're not putting up a show, a mask at all. And I know that sounds so strange in the context of things, but I still see that. Like, I feel like it was you never had this mask on when I knew you. And as a professional, I'm a marketer. I love copywriting and content. I'm very much in the creative side of marketing. But I do love emails and paid media and all of these wonderful things that help businesses grow. My main mission has been to take my experience from corporate, all that big business strategy that I learned, and try and apply it to smaller businesses, solopreneurs, people who are growing their brand and scaling and really deserve to have that big business strategy from the get-go. And that's what I've been doing. I live in Mexico City. I always try and mention this. I didn't used to, but then people would find it out and it would be weird because I'd left it so long to mention. I have this English accent, but I live in Mexico City. So I moved out here in 2011. So I've been here a little while now. I'm a permanent resident. And that puts me in your time. It put me in your time zone now, Susanna. It's
Not
12:10 for
not
me.
mine
No,
because
not
I'm
quite.
I'm West Coast.
You're West, yeah. But I'm not East Coast now either. Like I'm not even Central Time. I'm somewhere in the middle.
Well, are you in the middle? Are you said it was 12 for you?
12, yeah, 12:10, yeah. So if you look at
Okay,
it up on Google,
so
it
that's
says
mountain time.
CST,
For us, that would be mountain time, but
Mountain Time.
if you didn't change your clocks, then that would be Central Time.
Yeah, we are not exactly. We're normally Central Time. Well, normally I say. So fun little tidbit. Mexico used to put its clocks back until very recently, but it was different in different states and it was very confusing. And realistically, at least in Mexico City, we're pretty close to the equator at this point. Maybe the northern states that are right up against the US, it's different. But not this term, but the last one, so it would have been last autumn, they decided we're not going to do this anymore. It's too upsetting. It doesn't make a huge difference in terms of daylight savings. We stopped doing it, but that means that like what happened was a sort of 2000s bug, like when we thought that all the internet was going to crash and the whole
Right.
world was like just disappear in the year when it turned 2000. That's kind of what's happened here. So if you look up time in Mexico City, it's not always right, and if you look up time zone Mexico City, it's not right. And we just haven't really been able to adjust it. So I had this on my calendar for 11 a.m. my time, but I always buffer any podcast or anything that I have that's going live because I know that sod's law, it won't be the right time. So that's the fun fact of the day.
Oh yeah. Well, I know in the States, I think there's talk and I think there's some bills out there to stop doing it as well. And I know Oregon, they just passed something that's like, we're done, but we're not
Right.
gonna stop until Washington and California also stop.
Oh,
So we can
interesting.
do a
Okay.
West Coast thing, whereas we have other states, we do have individual states that they just don't do it, which
Mm-hmm.
means which
Oh,
means
good.
one part of the year they're one time zone, and the other part of the year they're a different time zone.
Is that true? I always have to inform people. Like usually I'm working with people on the East Coast, like New York, Boston. I have only one client who's in PST. But usually I have to tell people, like, I know your clocks went back. Like, we're not 1 hour apart, it's 2 hours now. Otherwise, I start getting a lot of 7 a.m. meetings that people are just very innocently putting on my calendar. And I'm like, okay, that is quite early. That's quite early. Yes, and that's where I am now. And I won't go too far into like my offering because I don't think I need to. I'd rather, talk about what we're here to talk about, and you and I have a really nice conversation. But I mentioned a marketer, so if anyone is interested in learning how to content market yourself, hit me up. There's loads of information on my profile.
Well, you've got the information, but you've got the class coming up too.
I have a course coming up. It's going to be my second boot camp that I'm doing. If anyone can't make the boot camp on the 22nd for whatever reason, there is a self-paced course that you can do on my site to teach yourself self-marketing. It's a range of videos, quizzes, tasks, homework, takeaways, downloadables that I've curated for you to be able to learn from me, from the way that I've grown my business and the way that I've grown businesses for other companies, using the power of writing, the power of what I consider like the least creepy form of marketing, which is content marketing. Is essentially, here's my knowledge, take it, and if you ever want something from me, here I am, and you can buy it. That's
Right.
the kind of premise of marketing and of content marketing, I would say. And I like that because I'm not a salesy person. I'm not the kind of person that loves to stand in front of 200 people and talk, although I have done that for a job. It wasn't my favorite. And I certainly don't want to be knocking on doors like, hey, buy from me. So content marketing works.
Well, there's Sam. So, I mean,
Hi,
seeing Sam
Sam.
there, that brings us to that brings us to that event
Yeah.
last year, which you, if I remember right, were trying to figure out how you even got roped into it, yet
It
you
was
were perfect for it.
So who suggested me to Sam? Who said, Sam, you should talk to Nadine?
Oh, I'm guessing it probably was Sam or maybe Amber or
Amber, maybe,
Nathan.
or Nathan, could be. Yeah, it's funny. I think the only person in that group I didn't know was Adam.
Yeah.
I didn't know Trevor, but I knew of him because he's famous, you know.
Well, it's like I didn't quite know Amber yet either
Mm.
until then. And then the next thing I know, she's the one that she's the one that did this for me and made
I
the
know. I love that you worked together on this. Can
so
you?
it's like
Okay, so I,
both
I
of
only know
them.
Amber's side of this story. What was it like for you? Why were you like, yes, Amber, you're the right person? Or what? How did it come about?
So it came about. I mean, this is the way everything works. And gee, look whose ears are
Look
burning.
who's here.
Look who's here. And now we have the answer. It was
It was
Nathan.
Nathan.
But with Amber, in August, I made that comment in our Firesiders group of I'm getting ready to publish. I'm just going to self-publish these books,
Yeah.
and I'm going to start looking for somebody to do the cover design. And I get this little message shortly after that saying, I haven't done this. Can I give it a shot, from Amber? And it's like, well, go for it. And all I did was said, I wanted I wanted them in a forest. I wanted them to be headed towards the ocean, and there had to be a woman there.
Hmm.
Because it's all from a scene in my mind of it, it's a scene that's in Duenbrook within the novel, because Duenbrook, the name Duenbrook, comes from these books. It's this story that Duenbrook, I created Duenbrook, and then the forest, I just picked it up and brought the name to the forest.
Kudos to Amber for being able to recreate an image that you had in your mind that you had been thinking about out of context and being able to make it a visual like reality.
But she did more than that, because one of the things I didn't tell her was that I wanted this series of books because I plan on doing more. I've got more in me.
Hmm.
I wanted the covers to be such that if you see one and then later on you see another one, you know they belong together.
Yes.
But I didn't really tell her that. And so when she gave me that first drawing of the woman with the red cloak, and
Mhm.
you only see the back. So it's like when she gave me this copy,
She didn't
this
tell you.
piece, this piece is really what sold it to me. It's like,
Wow.
this is what makes it
Mhm.
unique. I mean, it was important that I have her. And the funny thing is, she's not the main character, but she's an extremely important character.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's like I looked at it and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. And then worked with her to adjust it, make it work. And then I knew what I wanted for the next one. Uh, I kind of knew I wasn't going to get everything I wanted, because I didn't think she'd probably be able to figure out the cat riders, but they weren't going to be a key part of the front. Anyway,
Okay.
that's that.
You're giving away too much of
No, I'm not.
the no.
For those of you who love cats, you definitely want to read it, because
Okay.
I have. I mean, these are. Think back towards if you've ever seen He-Man,
Mhm.
and when his tiger or whatever whatever turns into the battle cat.
Mhm.
Think something like that.
Okay. Okay, right.
Only
Interesting.
a bunch of them,
Only much cooler.
and they're furry like I mean, think of turning toast and avocado into big battle cats.
I don't know. They're too, they wouldn't survive on their own in the wild. I don't know if they could ever be battle cats. But I love it. And I love that Amber's saying, that it was hard to recreate this. It sounds like a hard project. I think it's always hard to create a visual representation of something that's so powerful in the written form. Um, I know this because I'm forever handing my written form off to poor designers who then have to create something from my vague
Right.
instructions and my ideas. I sent something to a designer the other day saying, we're preparing for a World War today, and I'm working for a brand that I said something about you can lead a horse to water and you can make them drink. And my prompt was like, we're going to need the horses drinking. And obviously the designers are like, Nadine, like, why are you making us do these things? I'm like, I'm sorry, it's what's going to work with the copy. They did a wonderful job, of course, but that is the talent that a real designer has, to take your crazy musings as the writer and turn it into something that does actually make sense, from a marketing standpoint, to catch people's attention and to really give um, a tangible representation of that thing. So, and good for you, Amber. I'm now intrigued to talk about AI with Amber, but Susanna, I wanted to ask you a little bit more. Can you tell us about the self-publishing route? Because I'm in a lot of writers groups and I always hear people arguing about it. I think, like, I put out my own ebook and I was like, I was going to try it on Amazon. I couldn't get the KDR to work. I ended up putting it on my own site. But in terms of self-publishing a novel that has like a much wider audience, I could say, than what I did, why self-publishing? Why were you like, this is better than going through a publishing house, more,
There
less work?
Well, it's not so much that, and the reach, quite frankly, it's harder to do it when you're solo, because if you've got a publishing house, at least they're doing the marketing, and I'm not a person who is a constant marketer for that. And part of it is in my head, it's like, how often do you hit people over the head with, here's my book, here's my book, here's my book, here's my, like, so the sales aren't going to be as great unless your circle is
Mm-hmm.
also promoting you.
Yeah, true.
That's the difference with some of the other books I've been on. If there's multiple authors, you've got a group that's there to promote. I then there's the fact of, to do traditional publishing, you have two choices. You either have the hybrid, which means you're they still have to choose your book,
Mm.
but you're paying for most of the process. You're
Oh,
paying something into it. Whereas to get it published, so like this one was
beautiful.
traditionally published by Urano, so a Spanish firm, but they were coming into the US market. So
Hmm.
I knew somebody, she was the acquisition editor, and she went and had read the first part of my book, said she wanted it, and so I went with them, and then that opened up the door to get my dream agent. That's the problem, is you're
Wow.
pitching stuff.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
when
all the
you're
time.
pitching, you see the stories, and you just, it depends on how are you wired. Can you pitch 50, 100, 200, 300 times that one story, hoping that it will come up? Then
Oof.
when you do the traditional, the, even when they say, yes, we're going to do it with you, it's still another 18 to 24 months before it's going to come out.
Oh, that's a long time. Yeah, and so much could have happened in your life in that time if you'd have pushed it out.
Exactly.
I I know I'm gonna put her name in the chat actually. Yvonne DeVita, she calls herself the book whisperer. And she says that, okay, you've written your book, now the real work starts, because marketing it is a whole new job.
And it's going to be different for each person on how they want to approach it. Then there's also picking contests to put them in, what contests you want to submit it to, and then being able to say how it did. So that big blue ribbon over my shoulder,
Yeah.
that is a first place award for the manuscript of this
I
one.
remember. I know. I remember that. Thank
So
goodness you did those things, but you have to pay to enter those, of course, and it's a risk.
you pay to enter. It's a risk, and it was the
Mhm.
first novel length book I ever submitted.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, first place. Then I submit the second book, and so it's like, well, if the first one got this, no, it didn't. It didn't get past the short
It
list.
was destiny.
Yeah,
No,
it
but
didn't get
it's
past the short
wonderful that
list.
you were doing that because it's getting the name out there and it's getting the kudos so that when you do go to a publisher, you have something more to speak to. But it still interests me that you nonetheless decided to go down the self-publishing route because I think more people are doing that now.
Well, more people are doing it. One, a lot of people, they're not necessarily trying to do it for the money per
True,
se. For
true.
some, it's just, I'm a published author now.
Mhm.
Woohoo! Uh,
And does that so I work with a lot of clients who say this and they will say, I think I should write a book because I need to be able to put author in my headline. What's your take on that? Especially from a branding perspective, since you're going to be speaking on this soon.
that's
Did it change anything for you?
not so much that. Well, yes and no, because that you kind of lead me right into something I was going to add to this,
Okay.
and that's when you have the book, depending on what the book is. Now, if you remember when I started all of this, I comment about how this duology right now, this Armor of God series, is a story of its story form of move beyond boxes and shine.
Mm, mm,
So I can go to a speaking event, or if I'm speaking someplace, I can say, if you want to see an example of move beyond boxes and shine,
mhm.
here's a story that's what it is.
It's crucial to have these things that back up our um, they give us merits. They give us validity and evidence that we have the right certifications to talk about these things because sadly or perhaps currently there's no certification in going from boxes to butterflies, and a lot of the things that we all preach, you can't get a degree in it. So being able to show, but I have enough authority in this area that I've published a book on it and people have bought it and publishing houses have picked it up and it's won awards, that's huge. That must be huge. I
It's
aspire to
there.
have that
It
kind of.
doesn't necessarily mean that people are gonna glam onto it unless you start spending the money for the marketing. I
Yes,
mean, they can say that's where the costs are, but then that's where the work begins. Part of that is whatever platforms it's on. If it's on Amazon, are you willing to look into and spend the money to have them promote it?
precisely. Yes. Yeah.
And then if you can get it into a bookstore, and there's different ways to do that, then you could talk to the bookstore and try and see if they would do a book signing.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah.
So that
It gives you more options and more control on how you want to promote it as well in that way. And maybe if you have certain ethical reasons that you'd want to work with certain bookstores or certain promotional channels, you can choose them.
exactly. So
Hmm.
how are you looking at for books? Because I remember, was that one the one that I reviewed for you, or was that a different one? Because you had me.
Probably, yeah,
It was a
only
very
that
short
one.
one. Okay, so
Originally, I thought I would do more. I would do a series. Um, And I'm not saying that I won't do it. It's just that a larger pause than I expected has, yeah, there's no certification for coming out of Phoenix, but you did it. But if you can write a book about it, Sam, and you can publish it, and it doesn't have to be a book. I would even say this is sometimes why having my blog has been so valuable, and perhaps the reason why I haven't felt the need to publish books on what I do, talking to my ideal customer, the ebook that I made was designed for people who are like 10, 15 years behind me on their career trajectory, or they're just starting in a new startup and they don't really know what's going on. And the company has no processes. And how can you get, how can you kick it off whilst also protecting yourself as a content writer, creator, copywriter, kind of anything in that field? I think it would be useful to designers as well, web designers perhaps. And for me, the next step in that, for that ebook, because it's downloadable, I didn't print it, because a lot of the formats are editable and you need to be able to use them on your computer.
Right.
I suppose you could use them in writing, but I'm not that kind of person. I haven't got into the handwriting because my handwriting is awful. So the reason I thought about doing a second one would be, okay, what about the next steps for these people or a different group?
Mm-hmm.
As you've mentioned, other things came up. I started doing the course and I realized that a lot of people, while they will buy the book, they prefer learning in a more like almost presential setting. So that's why I started doing the boot camps for Command Your Content. Those specifically have been targeting business owners. So
Right.
the idea is you can get it done in a weekend, and that seemed more appropriate than a book that people could download and read, because I felt like that was what the audience wanted. So other people like me, me 15 years ago, I would have loved to got a book that told me sort of how to set up processes and how to get a company back on track and how to set up all of their creative marketing in a way that's not going to make the rest of the team's haters. And I think that we would absorb that in book format and it makes sense for people to go back to it. However, a lot of the business owners like yourself, Susanna, or people who are running their own thing, freelancers, we're quite hands-on and we quite like the kinetic learning and doing things while we're there. So I
Exactly.
condensed it down into like a weekend long course, then made the self-paced if people do want to take it on their own time. But for me, it was all about, well, what does the audience want? I think the audience actually wants like Zoom learning,
And
another MOOC, another course. And while I don't never saw myself as a teacher or a coach or falling into that sort of category, that element has been really interesting to explore for me as a nice shiny corner of my career.
well, and that's some of that is what CJ talks about, because you mentioned I can't even say it, but the kinest the type of learning.
Yeah, like learning with your hands and
And
doing. Yeah.
she's probably just, if she sees this, she'll just go, "What the? I told you that." But when it comes, there's so many different types of learning. We all
Yeah.
learn different ways. There are those that
Mhm.
they want the audio. There's those that they want to watch YouTubes. We all learn differently. We'll
You're
just
not
put
a YouTube person, even though you make video podcasts.
it. I watch lots of YouTubes. It just depends on, each of us has different ways of learning. So, like for me, what we'll take, like when it comes to makeup, a lot of people will say, just go watch a YouTube video. And I can watch the YouTube video and go, yeah, that's cute.
Mm.
I need that walk into Sephora, talk to somebody, even if they're just painting it on the back of their hand, to see it that way.
Yeah,
That's
that kind of
because
learning.
that's a more one-on-one for me.
Mm. Yeah, I can understand why that's really valuable to people. I got Sam and Chase, and the conversations going on here are amazing. um, I, I I I would say that it's quite hard to speak to all of your audience, but if you can create different formats, and this is what I do for a living. So if I can create different formats saying the same thing, eventually I'll help them get there. And to be
Yep.
honest, sometimes we need to see things several times. I might need to go into Sephora and have somebody show me the swatch on their hand, but then also I need to watch a YouTube video about it.
Yep.
I'm a huge consumer of YouTube videos, especially essay style, long form YouTube videos. But when it's a tutorial, I don't like to watch them in that way at all. I like to use them more
Right.
as like a documentary, learning about the full context. Whereas if I'm literally, okay, now you need to, learn how to plug in your headphones so that they connect, I'd rather read that. But that is very unusual. The majority of people don't like to read instructions. And I've said my entire career as a marketing writer, people don't read. So the majority of things are not read. They're created to
Yep.
guide you towards the visual content so that when you type it in, it searches and takes you to, okay, here's the tutorial, the video tutorial. But I'm one of these people, I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch a video recipe. I want to read the recipe step by step and control my own pace that way. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that you're more of a visual slash kinetic learner.
It's much more that way. I can do I can like recipes. I definitely want to see them, but I need that access to be able to have it written down. I need to see what the recipe was. I'm not going to remember when they say, here's put your flour in here and have this much of this, or they like put this in and this and this and this and like, I can't keep up with that.
No, it's very hard to learn a new skill that way, to be honest, as good as you can be with that sort of learning. And I've just Googled it because I've said the word so many times, kinetic. I don't think that's the word. It's kinesthetic.
See,
So a
that's why I'm having
kinesthetic.
tripping over it, because I knew it was
Kinetic
wrong.
means something similar, but yeah, I was like, now I've said it enough times. I think that's not how you say it.
No, kinetic is actually, I think of it, I'll go straight back to the military and some of the weapons they're
Mm,
doing now, kinetic, which just gives it a bigger oomph
yeah,
on the
yeah.
battlefield. Whereas it's that kinesthetic, and I know CJ says it all the time, but she lists out a whole bunch. And the thing is, we all learn differently. So
Mm,
you can say it's surprising if I'm not seeing them on the videos necessarily, yet we have to be able to create all these different options. And
we do.
you've already talked about that, how you are looking at the different ways to do it.
I try. Yeah, I try. And to be honest, I see you doing a lot of the same. The people in the chat as well, Amber, Sam, Chase, and I don't think I've met you before. I would love to connect. I know Melissa, there were some other names in here. I see a lot of these people doing this themselves. And I think it's quite innate to us usually to get our message out in many different ways.
Right.
However, I think the majority of us will kind of, what's the word, like will gravitate towards doing the things that we would like to absorb. And as I say, for me, that's writing. I want things written down.
Right.
But a lot of my clients, although they know they have to reach their readers in writing, they don't necessarily process in that way. So they're unlikely to read a long email from me, even if that's the way that I can best get my point across. And sometimes I'll do this. I'll say to people, like, I have something to say and I'm going to put it down in an email because this is how I communicate best. But I'm open to a call afterwards because I know that's how other people need, and I was going to say prefer, need to communicate. It's so interesting when you start looking at the different processes. And if we come back to like book writing, so I'm writing, obviously, if I write a novel tomorrow, I had an idea, but if I wrote that novel, it's going to be probably for other women of similar age, similar sexual orientation, and perhaps who've had adventures not completely dissimilar to mine in life. Whereas my publisher is not going to be that person. So how am I going to write to my publisher about a book that's targeted? So you end up having these layers of the audience, which is so fascinating. But working out, okay, well, first of all, I'm not even writing to the publisher first. I'm writing to their assistant. And first I have to get past their assistant, who might be, a fresh grad of 22 years old, reading through manuscripts and submission papers, and then
Yeah.
they pass on the best ones. So how do you reach every single audience along the way? It can be pretty overwhelming.
Well, and it's interesting to see how a lot of people say, study whatever it is that you want, see who the people are that are there, and basically mimic them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, yeah.
I don't.
Good. Because
I
you can. It's a valid way of doing it, but
it's a valid way to do it. See, somebody heard her name. It's a valid way to
good
do it,
one.
but I can't do it that way. Number one, the stories basically tell me what's going to happen. They have the idea, but I've got some stories that if I try to say, let's go this way, it either stops or it's like a petulant child that's gonna put up a huge tantrum and just not until you give in.
Do everything bad. Yeah.
Then you give into it and then it will let you go.
I
And
wonder
then
if
it'll come back again.
is that the case of right? So I have never hit writer's block, but I also never do things that I don't want to. So I wonder if writer's block is trying to force, like, you hear famous writers that they've written so many hit novels that they want to recreate. Excuse me, trying not to sneeze. I'm trying very hard not to sneeze again on with my mic unmuted. I would love to hear, maybe now that Yvonne's here to hear us talk about her because their ears were burning. I'm curious if this is something like, is that when people hit writer's block for you, Susanna? Like when you're trying to push the story to go somewhere that you think, I think this is what they would like, the story needs to take over. Do you hit writer's block or do you just start, I don't know, struggling?
Well, I can get it. I don't try to think of what the author or what the audience wants to read, because that's not my approach. I'm not. That's boxing myself.
Mm,
It really is. It would just take this whole focus of
yeah,
non-boxes. It's the same thing to
yeah.
try and write to a specific audience for a book. I can't do it unless it's my book, unless
Mm,
something that I really want to read.
right.
So sometimes when I hit writer's block, it's more of which of these do I want to start playing in.
Mm,
I have 3 series in the same science fiction universe that one has 6 short stories. The second one has the second one's about 30,000 words, and the short story of the beginning of it, well, that would be that white honorable mention on the wall right there, that white plaque. It got an honorable mention for Writers of the Future. The third series, it's also in the 30,000 range. It
mm.
has, it's made it to the short list, but it didn't get past the short list because I was competing against myself at that point. But that was the first story where I actually had a character, as I was going through the woods, basically say, you need to interview me. And I kept ignoring this. It's like, you need to interview me. You need to interview me. And I finally gave up, sat down, put a piece of paper, and it's like, write the question
Yeah.
and then see what happens. And write
Mm.
the question and see what happens. And that started
Oh.
the third series in that future universe.
Shows how trusting your intuition can be, not only, fulfilling and make us feel good, but it's business savvy.
But, I mean, if to me, I'm not the type of person that can just write for an audience that I can't quite identify with. I can't quite
Mm.
fit. When you're writing your story, whatever it is, it has to come from you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I said when I hit those points, for me, I get those blocks because
Mm.
when I try to force it in a direction and it's not a natural direction, that's when all the turmoil happens. That's when it's hard to move beyond where I'm at that point,
I
and
can,
things shut down.
yeah, I can see that happening, and I hesitate to name any projects that it's happening because it would be so obvious which companies um, this has happened for me at. But I've had it where I've been given a request, and it usually comes from, maybe the sales team or somebody adjacent to marketing, and they say we want this, and we're trying to link this offer with this, I don't know, national day of something, and sometimes you feel like you're forcing it. And often I can do it because I'm practiced and, I've been doing this for years, but you can tell when you're forcing something. And for
Right.
me, it's okay, you're paying me to do this, I will force it. I'll make it work because you want it to as best I can. Whereas if I'm doing that for my own brand, the number of times I would write something and think, well, that's just not really very me, and it doesn't fit what I'm like, the ethics that I'm trying to push. So I find that I usually hit a block when I'm trying to reconcile something that I want to promote, or it's not even monetary. Just, this is my viewpoint. I think everyone should own a cat. Like, this is my opinion, and I want to push that opinion. Let's say, and I'm trying to force it into like National Children's Day or something like that. When you start feeling that being so forced, you think, no, that's not. like now I'm using convenience, or I'm trying to use convenience for professional
Mhm.
gain, and it's not gonna, or just, persuasion gain, and it doesn't work. And I won't do it for myself. Again, if a company insists that they want it, my
Right.
ethics are much more flexible. But I think for me, um, I never want to feel like I'm forcing something. And I, like Sam, would also, however, say, okay, we'll write it down, try and maybe force it, maybe let it out, maybe it's a processing. You can always put things down on paper and edit it later. Was it Renee? I wish I could remember her surname. It'll come to me. Um, Renee, who's here on LinkedIn very often, she was talking recently about how you should. She had a very innovative way of talking about write drunk, edit sober. She was saying write when you're angry, and then post when you calm down, and that's how you get sometimes the most impactful things. I It sounds like Sam's done this. um, is this something that you've done? Like you edit when you're you write when you're in the fields and then you edit when you're calmer?
Not actually, not quite that much. But what I am finding is the hardest thing for me can be to stop looking backwards. I've written a page. Don't look at what I've
Ah,
written. Keep it going. Let
yes,
it
yeah,
go, because the minute you follow that squirrel, you lose where you were going. And
so true.
I have this tendency. I know I've got the tendency, and I've got two sisters that are like really close looking at me going, you need to get checked. But it's like it is so easy to go off on the tangent, or
Mm,
you you're like, okay, wait a minute, I need to check something on this, make sure I'm doing it right.
yeah,
And a half an hour to an hour later, you've gone through, I don't know how many rabbit holes, followed how many squirrels, finally remembered what you were doing in the first place, and
yeah,
then got back to what you're writing, only
yeah.
to go, what was I doing again?
And it's part of the process. I agree. Like as neurodivergents, we're so like the butterfly go past, and then we're gone. So it's very easy to distract me as well. I always struggled for that reason when I was in offices, because I am very easily I don't know if it's easily distracted. I'm very aware of people around me, and I
Right.
want to accommodate them. So somebody pushes past me, I'll like move my chair in like that, like, and I can't. There are so many things that I will self-police when I'm around other people, whereas when I'm just writing, I'm just writing. And your point about saying just keep going, like don't look back at what you just did because you get lost in it. Sometimes your brain needs, I don't know, this happens to me at least. My brain needs to get something rubbish out onto the page, and then I'll get where I was going. If I'd have stopped and gone, oh,
Exactly.
that's rubbish, let me try and force that into what I was trying to do, it doesn't work. I know this is probably for those of you who aren't creatives, you're listening to this and you're just, it's like, I don't know, two crazy painters talking about how you put color on a page and it just feels right or doesn't. But sometimes you have to trust the process, because your brain, it needs that sort of run up to get out the good stuff.
Well, and the other thing is, when you can stay focused,
Mm.
then for me, that can get me into one of those points where I can become a bit more hyper focused.
Oh, right. Yes.
So when I can stop following the squirrels going backwards, those are times when I can sit there and realize that 2 or 3 hours have gone by as I've
Mm.
just gotten into the flow,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then take that break, because that really is to me. And this is the other thing, I'm a very much, I need my paper.
Mm.
So when I oftentimes, depending on what it is, at least at the beginning, I need to print up what I've written
Mm.
so that I can, even if I make the changes on the computer, I need to see the paper version.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's just like getting the edits, depending on how everything works. The edits that I will get from somebody. Um, this was um, on the traditionally published book. The edits on that, I had to have the book printed. I had to have a copy of what I'd submitted, and
Mm.
then the copy of their line edits, because it was at that point, it's like down to the tic tacs, and then see what the differences are, because I could not differentiate and understand how things change looking at the computer screen.
Hmm. Oh, I can see that. Yeah, that's all of us in that have been in editorials. Yes, trust the process now. All of us that have been in editorials will always say, hit publish. That's when you'll see the mistake. So one thing I miss from being in editorials was when we would print out the like blown up versions of everything that we were going to send to like hard copy print and try and find the little details, because there would be like some random full stop somewhere that you can't see on the digital version until it's blown up and physical. And of course we did that because it
Right.
was the what is it called, like the color testing. So we would essentially want to see if the colors still looked okay in print, or if the pink was too pink, or it didn't stand out enough against the purple. So that's why we did the full print. But for the writers, we were like, this is where I'm going to find all the punctuation mistakes, the typos that we didn't see. We would still print things with loads of errors. It's kind of inevitable when you're sending something to print. And this is why I like my digital marketing so much, because I hit post, send it, and then go, oh God, of course there's an error in here that I need to edit, but it's just a web page, so it doesn't matter. I can go in and correct it immediately. I can definitely see why printing things out and seeing it is still more, I don't know if it's like it just makes it feel more real. So your brain thinks, oh, now I need to pay attention because it's actually printed out, or if there's like some physical reason as to why it works better when it's on paper.
Well, for me, when you're putting on paper, and it's a book especially, everything's double spaced. So
Hmm.
I have places that I can write my comments. I have spaces to add words.
Good.
If I
Yeah.
cross something out, it's there's room to work. If I want to
Mhm.
add a big long section in there, I will either, if it's short enough, I will write it in there. But there are other times when I was writing the Armor of God books, I would put an A, and then on a separate piece of
Mhm.
paper, at A, I would write whatever it was I was
Yeah.
going to insert there, because
Mhm.
it would
Yeah.
become like a whole new paragraph.
Yeah, yeah, it can. You have to, sometimes we have to be careful as well with letting ourselves over edit. There's a point where you have to say this is enough, because again, in my experience of editing on things that you have a lot of cooks in, and a lot of cooks spoil the broth. But when you've got a lot of hands involved in a piece of paper, for every change you make, there's, for every small impact, there's another impact somewhere else. So you move one thing, chances are that might make an orphan on the next page, or it might push something out of
Right.
line where it was before. So for me, it's something that's always been very hard, is knowing when to say, like, that's going to have to do, that will have to be enough. Not because I'm a perfectionist, I wouldn't necessarily say that, but because I want to be respectful of the time that we can invest in each thing, and there has to be a point where good enough is good enough. And if we make more changes, we're just going to keep moving it and changing it. Again, not the same when you're writing a long novel that's going to be printed sort of no matter where it is. But with marketing materials and sales materials, it's so important to have every
Right.
word in its place. Even the first word of a sentence, the first word of a line, even if it's not the beginning of a sentence, I've thought about what word will go there. So if I add in an and or a comma, it could just push everything off, and that's very frustrating. So
Oh,
I
I know it even with writing a book, because I'm the same way. I really want. I'm always looking at where it ends, trying to kind of fill the page, as opposed to um, having that extra line at the bottom of one page because of the way that it broke up a paragraph,
and it's a waste of
or,
paper
or
or something because it goes on to the next page.
and then not wanting that one or two lines on the last page before you go
Yeah.
to the next chapter.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And that's even with the Kindle process. It's because in the Kindle process, you're
Is
kind of
it?
stuck with what it gives you.
Mm. Oh yeah, I noticed that, and that was part of the reason why I didn't go that way with publishing it. Yeah, it wanted to give me what it wanted to give me, and me and my designer had thought very hard about the way we wanted things to be for functionality, not even just for aesthetics. Um, But yeah, yeah, Paula, it's good to know. It's hard to know when enough is enough, but I think setting yourself a deadline, of just saying this is going to have to go out. And again, a lot of the things that we're posting these days are digital and can be edited last minute. Like very few of us are sending articles to newsletters, and even Paula, sorry, Susanna, who's been published recently in 3 different places. If something went, like, let's say they spelt Dawn Dan, you could write to them and say it's got a W in it. Can you add it in? These things are still editable. So I think in this day and age, we need to be a little bit more relaxed about hitting publish, getting it out there. I'll correct the spelling errors later, you know. Anyway, that's what robots are for. Robots will find the spelling errors.
Actually, yeah, well, I'm not quite there, because here's the other thing. When I write, I know that some of the way I write is American English and some of it is UK English.
Oh
I
no,
will
yeah, well,
intermingle.
same.
I will intermingle them.
Yeah,
And when I see somebody try to correct me to go from, especially the UK to English, it's like, no, that's the way I want it. That's the word. That's how I grew up with it. That's what I see.
that's what I want to see.
I'm running with it. I don't care.
Yeah. Oh no, I do it as well, and there's some spellings. For me, it's been hard because I write for people all over the world, and there are some spellings that we don't know are different between different languages. Sorry,
Right.
different, you know, dialects or locations, and they're always the hardest to catch. I find again the robots, they do a pretty good job of catching them for me if I can set it up right. But you still need a human to go in there and go, "Hey, robot, today we're doing Australian, and I need it to be Australian," and then they're not perfect, but
Right.
I'm sure there's going to be somebody that will pop in the comments if Amber's still here saying, well, that's why you need a professional proofreader. And I will always say, literally any other set of eyes that isn't your own will be better than your own, because we don't see our own mistakes as easily
And,
when it comes to writing.
and this is why I don't do Grammarly, because Grammarly doesn't
It
get
takes
me.
away her drama dots. Yeah, Grammarly does make some odd changes for me, and it really wants to take out words that I've entered in for emphasis because it's going for precision, and that's fine. I'm all about being concise. I wish I could self-edit myself as I'm speaking now and be more precise in how I'm saying things. However, there are times when you want to add in that really and that just as if, and Grammarly's like, no, no, this is excessive. So I fight a lot with Grammarly.
And because you don't know what it's going to do. I don't know. I had a situation where I wrote how the original writing was that I wore a red dress with nylons, and what came back from the edits
Yeah.
was a red nylon dress.
Oh, well, that's not the same
It's like,
thing.
okay, these are not, but he's like, okay, was
No.
the editor like a
Mm.
2-year-old who doesn't know what they are, or
It could be somebody very young who wouldn't call what I call tights nylons, but like I would never call it nylons, but I'm aware of that terminology. So maybe somebody very young would be like, oh, that's what she meant, because they don't know that night. But yeah, or a robot or a
well,
very young
see,
person.
they didn't even change it to tights. It was totally gone. It goes from
They change it to
red
nylon
dress
dress.
with nylons to a red nylon dress.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like totally different thing, because I grew up in the 70s, so
And I
nylons
think that,
were the thing.
yeah, and it seems like a strange thing, in my opinion, it's just my personal opinion. It seems like a strange thing to write that I was wearing a nylon dress. Like the kind of um, fabrics that I might bother to highlight if I were writing linguistically would be wool or cotton. I can't
Or
imagine
silk.
saying I was wearing a polyester top on the day that I spoke to Susanna, or she was wearing a viscose. It seems strange. There are a few adjectives that we would bother to add, and the other ones you're just like,
Well,
no.
you want the descriptions to stand out, and
Yeah,
that's another way I look at it too. Is some things it's like common. There's like you said, there's no reason to say polyester unless it's really important to the story.
right. Yes.
But if it's a wool sweater, that doesn't necessarily have to be critical to the story,
Mm.
but it gives you a better picture of the sweater than just
Gives
a
you
sweater.
texture. Exactly. Yeah, it does. It gives you maybe the indication of the time of year, or like where they're sitting and how exposed it is. Yeah, I could argue this point. I'm going to stop there, but Paula wants to know what a red nylon dress would look like. I'm concerned. Probably not something we would wear out in the street.
No, it's well, see, that's the other thing is a lot of things that we might think are polyester are actually nylon.
True, true.
So there's a lot of these that are mix and match and mingle, and it's like they look alike. So the words aren't going to help you. It's better to say it's a low cut in the back than going into
Yeah, we
material
have to
is.
be, we have to be economical in the details as well. People only have so much space to absorb something. So if you go into like
Yep.
in-depth description of a dress and the reader isn't a fashionista, then maybe just like, okay, I don't need, just give me the parts that are either relevant to the story or one or two details that I can remember. Oh, it was lovely to see you here, Amber. I always send the wrong links. I sent the link out, of course, to people to say if you want to join, I'm going to be here, but I always do it wrong. My sister, my mum, my dad, they always write to me like, well, we tried to join, but you never send the right link.
It's like I don't know. It's well, something happened yesterday too, because when I set up the restream, I think somehow I also created another link. So
Oh,
I I I've got three. Let's see. I had the original post, and then I reposted it, but I thought I was reposting it as my business self, and it actually wasn't. So then I did it as the business self, and then
oh,
and then when I created the live stream with StreamYard, I I went too fast through things and then had to go back, make a couple of changes, kind of almost screwed things up, and then somehow created another event
oh
or
no.
whatever on LinkedIn. It's
Right.
like, okay.
Yeah, this does happen, and it's not just StreamYard. I know Restream does the same thing. We're always battling to get the technology on our side, and honestly, it should be more. It should be simpler. It just needs to be simpler. But anyway,
I
looks like
think
people made it.
we've got our hour in and then some.
Yes, yes. I've
So it
loved
just
talking to you
it's the
as
same.
always. As
It's the
always.
same. It's like I could keep going and going, and everybody. I mean, the thing is, if we keep going, everybody's going to be getting even more nuggets out of it because we just.
We can't give them too much, Susanna. We have to like put a cap on it at some point.
Well,
That's
yeah,
enough knowledge for you guys about us today. No, I mean, I don't know. I always enjoy talking to you. You're just such like it really warms my heart to talk to you and have you as a friend. And I'm really flattered that you would have me on Boxes to Butterflies.
it's. I've got this whole group of firesiders that I need to slide in here at some point.
Yeah, well, I've opened the door now, so everyone you can come on in when Susanna has time for you, because she's a very busy lady.
Well, see, next week I gotta make sure this is still set up, but the quartet. So the fourth member of our quartet that I talked about at the beginning,
Okay.
she's slated for next week.
Is she? Oh,
So if
good.
everything
Oh, good.
works out right, because she already had to cancel once because of commitments and things popped up,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be reaching out to her in a little bit and going, "Are we still on for next week? I hope. I hope. I
Yeah.
hope."
Yeah.
Because
Mm.
that means that I get to talk with her before I go into Portland for the that speaking event that I have on,
Yeah.
where I get to talk branding. It's like, go figure.
I'm just so happy to hear about all the opportunities that you've been given because you deserve them. Well, send my love and my hugs to the fourth member of our quartet, and I'll be watching next week, and watching you going to Portland and seeing all of that. This has been really wonderful.
It's been great. But if you have any last golden nuggets, how people can get a hold of you, because I want to make sure that everybody knows where you are, how to get a hold of. Jason said you guys are already connected, so you just have to
Are
set up
we?
a chat.
We just have to properly get to know each other. No, thank you. If anyone would like to talk to me, head straight to my LinkedIn profile and you can find there the link to my website, Brightwiser. There's all sorts on there if you want to just learn a little bit about me and what I do for a living. If you're more interested in seeing me on the personal side, Migrant in Mexico is my Substack, and there I talk more about the things that I face and appreciate and struggle with living here as a migrant in Mexico. And no, I think that's everything that I can share. It's last golden nugget is to keep watching the people that Susanna brings on this show, because she has wonderful taste in people. I don't think there's anyone that I've met through Susanna that hasn't been a genuine, authentic person. So that's the last tip. And thank you again, Susanna.
Oh, I'm so glad you were on, and I'm so glad for everybody that showed up. And I mean, a lot of the firesiders were in there too, or what is it now? The misfits.
Yeah, keep rebranding.
Keep rebranding, you bring somebody in, you rebrand. It's okay. It all works,
It all works.
especially since it's just us. So
Exactly.
as for everybody that's been on, it's been great, and I will talk with you guys. I will see you next time. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.